In this silly block placing game known as Minecraft, we're always trying to become better players, right? And there are many different ways in which to become better. And building, well, I've never really considered it to be one of my strengths. But what we're going to build in today's episode, I think might just be one of my best aesthetic builds ever. And I'm very keen to get going, but we got to whiz through a few things over here at Loglands first. Last episode, we constructed this incredible wood farm that makes rooted dirt, converts it into mud, and then into clay. And so we have automated the creation of bricks, terracotta, and of course, clay. But I've made a bunch of modifications that we're going to whiz through quickly. I've added a item filter to the minecart collection system here because sticks were getting caught in the system. Now we drop them into this dispenser and it shoots them into fire. I've also done the same thing over here at the end of the item filter because guess what? We filled this thing up with wood and then the whole system started to back up. And best of all, I've added a collection system on top of the leaves for all the items that pop through. Let's make that nice and obvious. This uses the idea that I talked about in the last episode, both rails and water being used together to scoop up those items. We also have this really cool junction system, so the minecart is going to be directed into this collection area. And when it comes back out, the detector rail is going to switch the rail so it goes down to the loop down below. And that's made the use of bone meal in this farm even more efficient. So if you want to learn more about it, you can go check out the previous episode. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Hermitcraft. And my friends, we are heading towards the shopping district, which seems to forever be expanding in multiple directions. Of course, we've been a part of that with the introduction of the Copper Cathedral, and now more shops are popping up around here. This gave me an idea, something I thought was just going to be simple and straightforward, adding a nether portal to bring some more foot traffic that way. But I decided that we should be big and bold, and rather than just throw down a bunch of obsidian and light it up, we should really try and make something awesome. Speaking of which, the previous nether portal, well, it's now transformed. I mean, look at this thing. It's derpy, cute, kind of adorable, and kind of creepy. This was done by Pearlescent Moon as part of her malicious compliance Mission Possible. And yeah, that felt like a mouthful to say. So I wanted to bring more people over to this area, but I decided to sit down and have a proper build session with a hot cup of coffee and some fresh inspiration. And well, you can be the judge. You'll see the result in this episode. But one of the first things I thought I would do is actually lay down where these two nether portals are. Yes, the structure has two of these on a corner like so, and I've run into a bit of a problem here. Let's go ahead and jump into the portal and see where we come through. Aha, look at this. This is not the nether hub up top. This is Etho's chunk loaders for his Frogger game. And I've been using a 3D coordinate calculator to calculate the distances between all of the different portals. And the ones that I created, well, they're like 50 blocks closer to the one that we have on the ceiling of the nether. So with a little extension from the main nether hub, we have this one over here, which has been synchronized. But here's the thing. When I go through this one, it takes us to the correct portal, which is ever so strange. So I went down a bit of a rabbit hole, trying different portals in different positions and going through the portal at different heights. And I couldn't get away from this problem. But that's when I discovered this mod called Nether Portal Fix. And this image here summarizes everything. This is how our nether portals are linking when they should link like this on the right-hand side. It is not going to deter me though, for I have picked out what I think is the perfect location. I spent a lot of time around here scouting out different locations, and this to me felt like the right spot. So unfortunately for us, I think the only way to proceed is to make this portal here an entrance one. We'll put some signs on it eventually. And then here in the overworld, this is going to be an exit only portal. And I don't think it'll be a big issue because, to be fair, most people get around with rockets. Anyway, that is the spot of our building for this episode. And before we get into it, I do want to do a little more redstoning over at Loglands. We are producing so many logs over here that the filter is backed up, and logs that come through actually get destroyed into fire. So there's plenty of excess logs to go around, and we're going to pinch some of these logs and use it to set up a furnace array, which I can't believe I haven't actually built yet this season. Now you'll notice that this spot over here looks a little different. I've actually dug out all of the stone that was here before so that we got some space for this project. And yes, it's not directly underneath that. So we're going to use minecarts and bring the fuel over to here. Now Loglands is absolutely loaded full of hoppers. So I would like to minimize the amount that we're going to use in this project. However, a furnace array will use a lot of these by default. We need both fuel to go in and items to be smelted, and that's the only way to get them in. To get them out, however, we can have a hopper minecart go below the furnace and pull these items out. Before our fuel supply, I would like to use charcoal. So that means we're going to have two inputs, and they're going to have the same thing, which is oak logs. And since they come from the same space, we're going to have a minecart rail running like this, and another one like so. And these will actually be linked together since we could have one hopper minecart delivering the oak logs to the same destinations. Then we need a minecart to go across the front here for the items that we are choosing to smelt. And then when they're smelted, another one to go underneath and pick all of them up. And so each furnace for smelting is going to use 4 hoppers. And what's comical about this is it's only one less per furnace than doing this with entirely hoppers. And that's because we're not using the oak as fuel. We're converting it into charcoal. Anyway, that's the way I'd like to do it because it's going to create a bunch of interesting challenges for our management of the minecarts that are delivering and picking up items. So first things first, let's pick out a layout that we can drop in to this space that I've opened up. And let's just jump a little bit further ahead, shall we? I've actually built most of the contraption now. And you're probably curious as to how many furnaces there are here. Well, there's 40 in that section and 40 over here, meaning that we can simultaneously smelt 80 items at a time. And last season, I did a furnace array that did a stack all at once. I wanted to go a little bit bigger because of that. And to be fair, we could have scaled this up even further. So you can quite easily imagine the rails here that snake around the top and also the bottom just coming out further or even having another U shape in this thing. The design will scale for more and more furnaces. But now that it's built, we got to figure out the logic for handling the minecarts, and I've already done 2 parts of this. And they both relate to getting fuel from over here and getting it into the furnaces. But the best way for me to show you this is by coming back to the test world. The first thing is having items inside of the minecart hopper and it going around in a loop. So you can imagine this is the big loop of furnaces right here. The important thing is that it detects it's still got items inside of it so that it can change this rail here and keep this thing in a loop. So let's see what happens when we take the items out and send this thing on its way. The detector rail doesn't actually do anything, so then it gets sent out to the collection area. Now this fence gate here is open to let the minecart back out, and that'll happen if the chest here is empty because of this redstone torch. Now when it has items inside of it, the redstone here won't activate until the minecart here is full. Okay, let's watch it go. It's about to fill up and then it goes on its way, and because it's got items in it, it's going to stay inside of this loop filling up all of our furnaces. And here is the first part of that on Hermitcraft, built exactly the same way. And the second part here is just missing a target block. Let's go ahead and place that. And this thing is slowly filling up. So I think if we just put down our minecart and nudge it in, it's going to be filling up. And then before you know it, it's on its way. Excellent. Okay, it's somewhere there in the loop and now it's going up to the top and we are seeing everything light up because now we've got these oak logs going down into the furnaces. This is so cool. This is so cool. So the time it takes for the minecart to get around means that this doesn't continuously smelt. And that's fine because we're creating a stockpile of charcoal and that will eventually back up into the hoppers here. And of course, charcoal can smelt 8 items in a go. All right, it's ran out of items and now it's heading over there for a restock. And now it's making its way back. Yeah, looks like everything here is in order. So now we need to work on the minecarts that are going to go out and drop items into each of the furnaces, and then the ones that come underneath to pick up the items once they're smelted. If this looks familiar, it's because it's the same circuit we built last season on Hermitcraft. I have made a change though. Down here I've extended the amount of repeaters. And that's because each tick equals 2 items. So if I add another one here, we go up to 82, 84, 86. And I mentioned this thing was scalable. And so if you wanted to make it bigger, you would just also extend the amount of repeaters here. And you know what? That's not correct. I've made a big mistake here. So rather than rebuild and re-record, I figured I'd keep this in and show you that I do make mistakes. My methodology for testing was incorrect. And when I went back, I realized that I need to balance both these repeaters up here and the ones down below. But now, when there's items in this chest, a minecart will be dispensed down below and it'll pick up exactly 80 items before it's sent off on its way. So we also want minecarts to be sent out down below to pick up the items once they finish smelting. So what we do is we look for an event that's currently happening related to the minecarts that distribute the items, and that's over the back here where this observer moves back and forth. We then pinch a signal from there to create a pulse extension that gives the furnace enough time to smelt an item and then sends out another hopper minecart. So in theory, the moment that something finishes smelting, there's another minecart directly below it to come out and take that item. Now it's going to go all the way around here and then come back to the beginning. And this is the bit that I'm yet to build. I'm still sort of figuring all of this out as we go along. We need to unload those items and bring them up to the top here. I've decided this is the spot where your smelted items will end up. Now, at the same time, we're going to have an empty hopper minecart coming across these hoppers after it's put items into the furnace. So we need a secondary track that goes back down to the beginning, turns it into its item form, and puts it back in this dispenser. But before we do that, I'd like to show you this little testing setup I made for experimenting with pulse extensions. They both get activated at the same time, which allows us to make adjustments and compare the overall signal duration. And another nifty thing I've done is put signs in because they'll smelt exactly one item at a time. So this thing will visually turn off in time with the redstone lamp. And if we want to be on the safe side a little bit here, we can just add a little extra delay. And that is, of course, this circuit that we have over the back here. Just realized all of this is just coming so close to our item collection thing over here. I do eventually want to make this like a proper room, so there might be a bit of a challenge to kind of keep this stuff hidden underneath the level of these chests. Well, that's not going to be a problem. I think we've given ourselves plenty of room here. And now that all the redstone is in place, I would like to do a live test together. Yes, I am yet to try this thing out. We got to cross our fingers and hope this works. But I have put in the work and thought about this. The rail at the bottom here, of course, brings back a minecart full of items. And so it heads up in this rail up into this contraption, which might look similar. It's going to dump all of the items into the water stream, which goes over both hoppers. And then the minecart makes its way back down into the dispenser it came from. It'll look familiar because we just built it over here, but this time we don't need this part of the gizmo here to redeploy the hopper minecart. So this is stripped down and simplified, and over here you can see that there is no item collection system. That's because the minecart, in theory, is going to be empty when it comes across here, and then it's just going to make its way back into the dispenser it came from. So, moment of truth. Let's just go grab some stone. This is where they go in. And, okay, it's doing its thing. Then the next one goes out. Oh, okay, this looks ever so good. Ever so good. It's coming around to the ends there, and I just want to check that it's empty as it comes past. Whoo, it's empty! All right, let's check the next one as well. Yes, look at that. Okay, it appears to be working. Let's look inside some of these furnaces. Oh, that is awesome. But you know what? I haven't seen any come out the bottom here. Something went wrong with our pulse extender. I do have a theory as to what it was. Aha, I've seen the errors of my way. We don't need a pulse extender. We need to run the pulse through a delay because there's going to be multiple pulses coming in quite quickly. So I think actually the only way to do this is to just run it through a whole bunch of repeaters. All right, with a bunch more repeaters, this thing is now kind of working. So I put in 80 items to be smelted, and now the timing is going to be perfect, right? That thing comes out and scoops the items up. But because there's two pulses in the system, another one comes around that doesn't do anything. Now, if I put in 160 items, 3 minecarts would go in, another 80, and then Thor. So there'll always be this trailing one, and I don't think it's a big deal. So let's chuck the rest of this stuff in here. And there's only a couple more pieces of this pie to share with you. And watching it in action, by the way, is such a pleasure. So this empty minecart comes over here and goes back into the system. Apparently somehow it got a log at some point. And here comes the one with the items, and there it is going into the water. And so now the hoppers are just distributing them into the chest at the front. Absolutely awesome project that may still need a little bit of fine tuning, but I love it. Seeing these minecarts going around is just wonderful. And as you know, the aesthetics for this area will come later on, but now there is just so much stuff to be done. I think I'm going to have to shoot Ren a message and we're going to have to start decorating Loglands. But for now, my friends, we're going to move on. It's building time. Before you see the build that I'm going to create on Hermitcraft, I kind of wanted to walk you through the building process first of all. You see, I approached this whole thing with a very clear vision of how I was going to design the build. And I actually think this could translate into survival. I'm obviously going to do all of this in creative to give you an example of how I put it together. But I've been thinking it's possible just to do this straight up in survival if you've planned it out well enough first. We start with some basic shapes that we're just going to stack up vertically. I'm using World Edit and I've created a selection here. Everything's now been stacked by 6 blocks and my new selection is just over here. Now it looks like somewhat of a tower, and this one over here we're going to stack even higher. Then I've gone and added in some floors at each of the levels here. Maybe I might want to make this structure a little more complicated. I could come in here and add a few extra elements. But as you'll see, we're going to keep this one like smaller scale as it's just a demonstration build. All right, we got a main entrance there and a little staircase along the side of this thing. And now it's time to start thinking about texturing because the basic shape is in place. Now there's 3 components that I've got here and I've tried to make it match the environment that it's in to some extent. We're going to have a darker base material for the main structure, and then our towers are going to have this lighter white texture palette to complement the snow around here. Then to add a little color, I felt like prismarine would be really good for this snowy biome. So now we take these colors and we get stuck in. Hopefully I've made this thing big enough for what we want to do here. We just kind of want to gradually fade this texture all the way up to the top. Yeah, there's not a lot of wiggle room here for the amount of blocks that I've got. I am still learning how to do all of this myself, and I think I might have made a mistake here by picking blocks that are more natural textures than structural ones. Either way though, it's the process that we're going to be focusing on today. Moving on to our next block palette, I've replaced all of the light grey wool with diorite and calcite. We're going to put some of the chiseled quartz blocks down here near the bottom of the structure. And we're going to try and avoid like individual blocks on their own. We don't want it to look too random so much as like clusters of material. And then to get a bit more shape into this thing, we're going to use the wall block to kind of break up the edges. This is something I didn't actually use in the build we're going to make on Hermitcraft, but again, it's like part of a process that gives this the right kind of details to make it work. The other one would be a few windows here and there. It's important to put some black wool behind these windows too, so they can kind of pop out a little. And then we want to go ahead and put on this prismarine trim up the top here. So I've got some walls, and then I'm just going to kind of alternate some other blocks in between them, maybe at this level. And this is going to give it way more of a castle-y looking structure. So down here where the black wall once was, I've swapped in some complementing textures, and then we've kind of created an alternate to this with the dark prismarine. Then we swap out the brown wall for packed mud and mud bricks. Now, I'm not going to go overboard with this demonstration, but you can see the essence of something quite interesting coming together here. I think I made a little bit of a poor block palette decision down the bottom here, but this was my approach to making what you're going to see on Hermitcraft. I did it on a larger scale. I put way more time into the details and picking out the blocks that I was going to use. But I think once I become more experienced with this stuff and you have a better knowledge of what blocks work together, you can kind of take this process and just do it straight away in survival. I've got some ideas on perhaps giving that a go here on Hermitcraft at some point, but we've got to do the first build. You haven't even seen it yet. And goodness me, it's dark and gloomy. The rain is never enjoyable in Minecraft. Let's sleep this night away and get some construction underway. So it started off with some foundations for the shape of this build, which was elevated off the ground, and it kind of shows you how we experimented with putting squares together like we did with our creative build. The main box was the first one to get built, and the texturing here is so nice. I love the progression of the color. Unfortunately, the blocks I picked on our creative example were nowhere near as nice as this. And then it was a case of building up the towers. So we transitioned from the same material that we have at the bottom into just having lots of weathered copper. And this one doesn't have windows. It's got some iron bars. Maybe they're jail cells. This tower, however, has a different block palette, and down at the base we even use lots of those copper bulbs. Now this is the sort of texturing that makes more sense at a distance, and as we go up we use less and less of the cut copper blocks just so it gets a little lighter up there. On this side we have another tower, and something you'll notice about those windows that I've been adding and using copper grates is that on this side I've used some of the less oxidized textures, which makes them pop out a little more. So that one was made with the weathered blocks, and then the one next to it is made with the fully oxidized, so you get a little more contrast between each of the shapes. Now I wanted to add in a staircase at the back and then a sort of bridge between the two towers closest to each other. So there's quite a few different block palettes here going up against each other. And once that was done, I proceeded to fill in the floors on each and every level. So all of these towers actually have a floor. You may not be able to access them through the building, but you know, it kind of wraps up the build. And then for the finishing touches, we put in those shapes that you see on the top of castle turrets. Each and every one of these has them. I think there's like 2 designs that I alternated between with this. So for the smaller towers, they get less blocks in total. It's a little shallower. And then for the bigger towers, they've got more height to them. And it all comes together beautifully. I love how this build looks. And from many different angles, it looks wonderful as well. But I think it actually looks its best at nighttime. And there is a missing component as to what makes it look so good. We are talking copper bulbs. This is going to allow us to control the light levels that come outside of this build by putting them behind the copper grates. But it's also going to match the texture of the build as well. All in all, once we put these in and nighttime rolls around, this build is really going to be elevated to another level. And now's a good time to mention that I got all of these copper bulbs by using the blaze farm that we built either last episode or the episode before. I went over there and AFK'd with no problem, just left the clicker running, none of the blazes attacked me, and I got stacks and stacks of blaze rods. We used them to make these copper bulbs, which are now in place. There's quite a lot of them, and as I mentioned earlier, we kind of mixed up the amount of light they give off. And the nighttime is coming around, and this is when this build comes to life because of those glows just coming out of the grates. Yeah, this is just absolutely gorgeous from like any angle you look at it. Like, let's walk out of the copper cathedral. Just peeking over those trees. Oh, this is so good. I genuinely feel like this might be one of my best Minecraft builds ever. But it's probably not done yet. Like, there needs to be more environmental manipulation. This grass around the bottom is just temporary. And we probably want to put some trees and other objects nearby. But the texturing and the atmosphere that it has is perfect. And I absolutely love it. Comment down below and let me know what you think of it. I am really looking forward to reading my comments on this one. I tell you what, the mobs have spawned. It's time for us to bounce. So I know I just said it a moment ago, but my closing remark for this episode is just comment and let me know what you thought of all of that. I'm really happy. This feels like turning a leaf on my building. And I'm sure in the future we're going to build a few more using the principles that I used to come up with that design. But that's going to be it from me this episode of Hermitcraft. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, leave a like, subscribe to catch future episodes, and I'll see you soon with another one. So take care. Bye bye.